sample over about 100 different water bodies per year. They renovate like we did down at Pelican Schoolhouse and some of those. We improve fish habitat. We improve boater and angler access. We do a lot of new lake construction assistance in the eastern part of the state with the Papio, Missouri NRD, where they've built some new flood control structures. We try and get them developed and built in a manner that is fisherman friendly and fish friendly, to where before they dig them out, scoop them out, and you got habitat like this floor, and they really aren't that productive, and then we have to go in and try and make something out of it. We're going in ahead of time and working with them to make sure that we get those fish-friendly features built in. We provide information and assistance to the public, and we do aquatic invasive species monitoring and control. Our production section, we've got a hatchery here at Valentine. We've got one at Calamus, our newest one at North Platte, one at Parks, Nebraska, the southwest corner, and we got one down over in the northeast at Grove Trout Ring Station. They produce about 25 million fish a year, stocked into about 300 different water bodies across the state. They cover the entire state. We also inspect private hatcheries and our own hatcheries for diseases, and then we also provide information assistance to the public. Our research section. They do statewide investigations, but right now we got a project coordinated at Harlan County and Lake McConaughey. Our Lake McConaughey one is geared towards white bass reproduction. They manage our computer databases. We try and keep everything organized, and we got lake management plans and stuff, so they're all in a database. We work a lot with University of Nebraska at Lincoln and University of Nebraska at Kearney on different research projects. We can't do everything in-house, so we coordinate with them to do some of these other projects. We also have a representative where we work on the Missouri River. A lot of our Missouri River work is funded through the Corps of Engineers, and it's special projects associated with the pallid sturgeon. And we also monitor paddlefish and catfish on the river, but that's through our game fund. But all the other Missouri River stuff is through the Corps of Engineers funding. Our education division, one employee. He covers the entire state. He does family fishing workshops, fishing in the schools, provides different materials for our parks, for providing angling opportunities for some of the people that are using our parks. They build capacity by teaching and training our teachers and volunteer instructors to be able to create a bigger program than what one person can do. Our outreach, that's one person. For those of you from Valentine, probably know him. It's Daryl Bauer. Daryl does his blog. He does public meetings. He oversees the Fish State Record program and also deals with Facebook. Those are some of the things that, fortunately, I don't have to deal with. He also answers the phone a lot. Fisheries projects. Joe?
My name is Joe Rydell. I'm the district biologist out of the Alliance office. We got quite a few projects to tell you. We're going to show you some of the ones we've been working on. We have a few other ones that we probably don't have time to touch base with, but if you've heard of anything else that besides the ones that are presented today, have any questions on, please feel free to ask us or come approach us later on. The project I'm going to talk to you about is our aquatic habitat project that's going to be going on at the Fort Robinson State Park. For those of you not familiar with Fort Robinson, it's located just west of Crawford off Highway 20. On the park, we have 11 ponds, and what we're looking at doing is trying to do some improvements on these 11 ponds, or most of these ponds. Since there's so many ponds in the area, and this is kind of a really big project, one thing we decided to do right away is we're going to break this project up into 2 phases. Not only is this going to help us out budget-wise, but it's also going to make sure that we have maintained fishing opportunities on the fort at all times. So since this is a high-use area, we want to make sure we keep opportunities in, don't just get them all out of commission at one time. So our 2 phases we're going to look at, we'll look at starting off with phase 1 will be the Grayble Ponds, Cherry Creek Pond is diversion, and then lower Icehouse Pond will be the 3rd one. And then phase 2 will come back in, do Carter P. Johnson and Crazy Horse Pond. And I'm going to talk about each one of these ponds, kind of show you a little bit about what we're doing with each one. So we start out with the Grayble Ponds. The Grayble Ponds is located on the south side of the highway. This is a series of 4 ponds. They're old hatchery production ponds from the Crawford Federal Fish Hatchery. They're fed from a spring that originates on the south side here. And the water from this spring originally was the water supply for the prisoner of war camp on the fort. So there used to be an old pump that would pump it up to a cistern and deliver water to that prisoner of war camp. This water runs from the south to the north, and these are typically right now used as cold water put and take trout fisheries. Some of the issues with these ponds, they're over 100 years old. The outlet structures are mostly failing. These ponds are very shallow. They weren't meant for full-time fishery. They're meant for production. So a few of the changes we're looking at, I'll talk about in just a second. But the outlet structure is one of the issues. As with a lot of our aquatic habitat projects, we're also looking at improving angler access. And although there's pretty good bank access around these ponds, it's not ADA accessible. So one of our main goals on this is to provide ADA accessible access on a lot of these different fisheries. So this is just an example of the type of stuff we're going to do on these ponds. So this is the first 2 ponds that coming from the south to the north. We're going to deepen these ponds out, get them to a depth that will support a long-term fishery. We're going to use some of the brush that we excavate around these ponds.
I have a question. So right now you said they were shallow?
Yep, right now they're shallow. They're only...
When you say shallow, define shallow?
So 2 to 4 feet.
2 to 4 feet. So
Yep, they vegetate almost to the surface in the summertime.
I got you. So the depth's going to be what when you...
So the max depth on these ones right here is right around 12 feet when it's done.
You're going to dredge them out 12 feet?
Yep. Right now they're drained. We're going to excavate them out on these ones.
What percentage of the lake will be 12 feet, you think?
I'm not sure the exact engineering plan on that one, but it's...
What percentage of shallow water
Yeah.
water would be?
I believe it's a 3-to-1 slope on the shorelines. Yep, and we're putting in different rock piles, trying to get a little bit of depth diversity in there. And with rock versus the substrates in there, it'll also be substrate diversity, trying to encourage a little bit of habitat for them. Some of the brush that we're going to excavate out that we have to remove off the area, we're going to put back in the ponds as brush piles for habitat structures as well. Along with these projects, we're looking at improving angler access. So on pond 2, well, first of all, between pond 1 and 2, rather than replacing this outlet structure, these 2 ponds are going to be connected together. We're just going to notch the berm between them, and the existing berm is going to be considered an angler access point. We're going to put in an ADA pad and a kayak launch on pond 2. And then we're also going to put in a sheltered fishing pier. As you saw in that picture before, there's not much for trees around the area. It's pretty open. We're pretty hot and dry in the summertime. So providing a sheltered area for anglers. Here's the example of what we have for engineering plan for it. Nice little bench, nice shelter. Get people out of the area, make it more family-friendly place to go. And we're going to do a lot of those features on a lot of these different ponds. So with the Grayble Ponds, I'll move back to the Grayble Ponds here. So with the Grayble Ponds, we're only working on ponds 1 through 3. With the water supply, pond 4 might not support a long-term fishery with the water supply coming in, especially during drought years. Go ahead.
How many gallons per minute from those springs do you think?
I don't have the numbers right offhand. It was measured before. Al Hansen, our district supervisor, measured it years ago, so he has an estimate. We can get that number to you if you're interested.
So I'm just curious. How many acres are these ponds that you feed from that one water supply?
I don't have that exact number right offhand either. I can get it for you though. It's probably less than 5 acres total. So moving on to the next series of ponds, we have the Cherry Creek Pond, it's Diversion Pond, and this is another series of old hatchery production ponds. And the way these ponds work, there's a spring flow that comes through the main Cherry Creek Pond, or this main Diversion Pond, and it diverts the water into the main Cherry Creek Pond. This was the main production pond. These ponds are also very shallow. They're going to be dug out, deepened. The outlet structures are all very old. They're all going to be replaced. Another issue with these is the topography around it's real steep and timbered, and there's not much for bank access to it. So we're going to look at doing some access, putting in a little shelf here on the Cherry Creek Pond, and then we're going to put in a little pier and then improve some bake access. Currently, the Diversion Pond over here is part of one of the fort's main livestock pastures, and we're going to working with the fort. We're going to supply them with an additional water supply for that livestock up the hill, and we're going to fence out the Diversion Pond, make it a little more of a family-friendly area. The Icehouse Ponds. This is a series of 3 ponds. Currently, these are not on our aquatic habitat list, but with any of our aquatic habitat projects, we're going to take the advantage or use the advantage of having equipment contractors in there and do some angler access improvements. The one we're going to work on is Lower Icehouse. Once again, the terrain and the vegetation is one of the main problems for it. So we're looking at putting in, I believe we have 3 access points we're going to put into it to improve it. Another issue with Lower Icehouse was identified during this project that the outlet structure was in rough shape. So we did find funds that we're going to replace that outlet structure as well. Then phase 2, we have on the other side of the highway on Soldier Creek.
On phase 1, what's the budget for that?
I believe, I'm not sure the exact number that we had forecasted. Well, I think it was 1.6 or 1.7 million. Yep. So pretty expensive, moving a lot of dirt. So we'll move on to phase 2. Phase 2, we have on Soldier Creek, we have 2 impoundments. We have Carter P. Johnson upstream, and then downstream, about a mile downstream, is Crazy Horse Pond. And one of the issues with these, back in 1991, a significant flood came through, and a wall of water came down and pretty much filled in both these reservoirs during one event. Following that event, in 94 and 95, there was our operations division went out and did a dredging project. And it's kind of hard to see on this, but you can still see the old dredge marks on it. They excavated out quite a bit of material, but this pond still vegetates pretty much to the surface. We're going to work on trying to get this deep into what we can for our storage permit.
Got another question, sorry. Are you still part of that same watershed then, so that could occur again?
Yes,
Yeah.
it is. Another issue with Carter P. Johnson is angler access. So this is the dam on Carter P. You can see it's riprap. Pretty difficult to get down to the water's edge. And during most of the summer, this is about the only deep water access that's not vegetated to the surface right now. So we want to try to encourage, get some points out there where people can access that. Currently, a lot of anglers are going out on our walkway, getting to our water control structure, and this isn't a real safe area for people to be out there trying to fish on. So we want to provide some stuff that's more user friendly. I don't have the designs for this phase 2 quite yet that I can provide, but if you want more details on it later, I'd be happy to talk with you or get you some of that information later on. And then moving downstream, this here is Crazy Horse Pond. Once again, you can see this is early in the year. You can already see the vegetation almost to the surface. Very shallow. We're going to do the same type of features. We're going to dig this one out. The outlet structure on this one's in great shape. We don't need to do any work on the outlet structure. We're going to excavate this one out, and we're going to put in a couple angler access points and some habitat improvements. Our current progress on this, we're looking at finishing up phase 1 2019 before the year is over. We've hired Meyer Construction was selected to do phase 1. JEO Consulting has done our designs for it, and then following phase 1, we're going to get into phase 2 next couple of years. We'll move on.
All right, my name is Zach Brashears. I'm the biologist stationed here in Valentine. I'm here today just to give you a little update on the Valentine National Wildlife Refuge Habitat Project we've been working on for quite a while. It's a joint project between the Fish and Wildlife Service and the Nebraska Game and Parks. Our funding for this project was through the Angler Access Program, Wildlife and Sport Fish Restoration Dollars, and the Aquatic Habitat Stamp that comes on your fishing license. This project initially began in 2011 when we started writing it up and started the whole design process. Construction was completed in 2016 through early 2018, mainly working on these 9 lakes in the upper portion of the refuge. Since then, barriers have been installed, dredging has been completed, new dikes, and all kinds of stuff out there. We also started renovations of these systems. In 2015, we began with Watts Lake. It's not connected to the rest of the water bodies. And then in 2018, we did Pelican School and Whitewater, which I'll talk about here in a little bit. First of all, our renovation plans for these 3 lakes were to try to lower these lake levels and try to get the water out of the vegetation. It gives us more of a chance of a complete kill. And our plan was to apply a rotenone in early September. We also wanted to focus on trying to get some of these game fish out of the lake. We opened it up to angler harvest early on. They did a pretty good job, but we knew there were still fish out there. So utilizing the Sandhills Prairie Refuge Association with some volunteers, I think a couple of them are both in here, Steve Isom and Mark Linval, we went out, we were able to run 64 trap net nights and about 20 some hours of electrofishing. We removed 498 northern pike, 182 largemouth bass, and 178 adult bluegill. These fish were transferred to other waters on the refuge that were still being fished, so they could still be utilized. I'll talk about a little bit about Pelican Lake. Pelican Lake's located right here in the middle. It's about 880 to 900 surface acres in size. And if you look at it, there's a ton of drainage here in the southeast portion of the lake and also to the southern portion of the lake. In fact, this drainage connects all the way up to West Long. So even these little ponds along West Long are connected to Pelican Lake. Well, we wanted to make sure when we were doing a renovation on Pelican Lake that we got everything covered. So the day before the renovation, you can see we spent most of the day treating these larger bodies of water up through this watershed, these little ponds here and through here. What we didn't quite realize was during the 1960s and 1970s, they used ammonium phosphate to blow waterfowl habitat throughout these systems. This is Pelican Lake, and this is School and Whitewater. And if you count the yellow dots, there's approximately 100 holes blasted out there. So we spent about another week treating all of these little holes. Mostly you can see with backpack sprayers and ATVs if we could get there, but most of them we had GPS coordinates. We had to walk right to the yellow dot, give them some rotenone, and away we went. So we got everything treated approximately a week, and then decided on September 6th we were going to treat Pelican Lake. About 35 personnel from the Game and Parks and the Fish and Wildlife Service crew showed up. We had 10 pumper boats and 2 airboats to put on all the rotenone. And then we also had Fish and Wildlife Service crew with their excavator digging us out a channel to get in and out of the bay. Also had wildlife staff from the Game and Parks to help load rotenone on the boats. And I'll get to what the sizes of the rotenone are in a little bit. But we had about 35 staff, wildlife, I&E, fisheries, Game and Parks, volunteers, you name it, were out there. So it went pretty smooth. Pretty big operation for this. For the 10 pumper boats, here's a pumper boat pumping the rotenone out. That's liquid rotenone. We also had pumper boats out there putting on powder rotenone. They put on approximately 2,400 gallons of liquid and about 2,600 pounds of powder out there in approximately about 7 hours. Just the chemical cost to treat Pelican Lake was $215,000. So, and the initial construction project on the refuge, we've spent about $2.2 million to even get to this point. So, but you can see all the barrels up there. They were pretty happy to get those over here to salvage them for metal. Even got Pat Berger and Commissioner here going for an airboat ride. So. It took quite a while for the rotenone to get mixed throughout the system of the lake, but about noon on the day of the renovation, we were seeing what we wanted to see. We started seeing these adult common carp coming up. So we knew we were getting it mixed good enough and getting it applied correctly on the lake, trying to cover every surface acre of the lake. Our boats were out in the deep water, running transects back and forth, and the airboats were just staying in the shallows, trying to keep those carp off the springs mainly that were freshening up. This is just a couple pictures the day after the renovation, and you can see the numbers of common carp along the banks, even out here where the wind had blown them up. This is a picture from Juan Carlos, quite a few dead carp, great big carp there. What was nice about this, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service had some technicians and Mel Ninneman, and they went out and actually did some estimates of how many fish we killed on Pelican Lake. They estimated there was 20,000 adult carp, and we killed 5,700 adult game fish when we renovated the lake. These common carp averaged about 12 pounds, so 240,000 pounds of carp in Pelican Lake, or 266 pounds an acre, if you wanted to break that out. So, kind of interesting.
And we found out from our Sand Hills Lake study that these Sand Hills Lake produce about 300 pounds per acre. So 266 of that was carp. You know,
Of the game fish, what primarily game fish are left in the lake?
A few, yeah, and that really helped. It's them removing them, but some smaller, mostly smaller pike, probably 22 to 26 inch pike. We did see a few adult bluegill, the 8 to 9 inchers, and a few bass, but probably mostly pike. I don't know if the Refuge has that or not, so we could definitely ask them, because they were out there counted every single individual fish, so they probably have that percentage-wise how it broke out. But that's pretty minimal for a lake that size to talk about 5,700 game fish. So.
Well, except again, I was up here a lot last summer, and a lot of friends of mine were up here last summer, and a lot of people were taking out every single pike that they could. So I don't think you can just say because there weren't that.
I understand that. I know they took out a bunch, like I said earlier.
Minimal at the end,
Mm-hmm.
but before the renovation, there surely was a lot bigger percentage.
Sure, yeah, I understand. Yep, that's why we opened it up, just to allow people to harvest those so early enough on. So, and then try to do what we can with nets and electrofishing. But so. Also, as part of this project, we wanted to get whitewater and school lakes done on the Refuge. These lakes won't be open to fishing. They're not one of the lakes the Refuge allows fishing on, but they're connected in between Pelican and Dewey, so they needed to be treated just to try to keep carp out of the system if we have any chance at it. Due to the last year with all the rainfall events we had and everything, these lakes stayed really, really high throughout the summer. Finally, in early November, we found a good opportunity. We had the lake down pretty much out of the vegetation. This is Whitewater Lake in the background, and School Lake lies over here. But we had the lakes down. We thought, well, let's go for it. The access was very limited to these lakes, so we used a tractor to get the road onto the lakes, and all these lakes were treated with 2 airboats. So we spent pretty much 2.5 days just in airboats treating these lakes. But it went pretty good and was pretty successful, I think, so time will tell. And this is just a video I put together. What we're going to deal with down the system when we get to lakes like Willow Lake.
I got a question for you. What did you notice as far as the difference? Because, you know, Pelican had fishing pressure, whereas these other two.
There was a lot more game fish in those lakes. So.
As a percentage?
Well, Whitewater, I should say, had game fish in them. School did not. We kept treating School Lake. It was fairly deep. We were surprised, and we had to treat it anyways. But no fish existed in School Lake, even though it was connected between the two, because the alkalinity was too high. Salamanders was the only, tiger salamanders were the only things we seen in School Lake. So.
What did you find in Whitewater?
Northern pike, largemouth bass, perch, bluegill, so everything that's in Pelican. I mean, they could come down the system pretty much before that. So.
Was the carp population as big as it was in Pelican?
Not as big, just because they had the game fish, you know, they're picking on them, more of them. So, I mean, the game fish population was quite a bit more than Pelican Lake. So, it's just that they're not, the carp aren't filling that void when the game fish are removed out of the system. So, yeah, it was kind of interesting to see. I wish we could have done some fish estimates on that just to see what an unfished lake versus a fished lake was, but. We got some other projects going on. I'll show you here in a little bit. That way maybe we can look at some of that in the future. So here's our renovation schedule. We got Pelican School and Whitewater done. Hackberries are planned 2019, probably looking at early September. Dewey 2020, and Clear, McKeel, and Willow, the bottom end of the system where we're seeing the major problems of carp in 2021. I was talking about the study a little bit. As part of these renovations, we wanted to document fish populations before and post renovations, and also we wanted to look at different carp abundances in these lakes, kind of like you're talking about, whether you have a few carp or tons of carp, and look at different things involved with all that. We're looking at fish community. We're running trap nets, electrofishing for carp, electrofishing for largemouth bass. We're looking at system attributes such as total area, land use, water quality, pH, ammonia, nitrogen, turbidity, vegetation, both submergent and emergent, and also our plant taxa richness on those water bodies. And that one will be really interesting on lakes that have carp versus lakes that don't have carp. And then we're really interested with working with the wildlife division on our bird communities, our shorebird usage, and our waterfowl usage on these lakes, especially during the spring and fall migration periods across these lakes that don't have carp, and medium carp densities and high carp densities, and trying to compare all that. This is a 3-year study. We're in year 1, so it'll be interesting what comes out in the next couple years, but we're also working with Oklahoma State University on doing some invertebrate collection on these water bodies. So.
You guys work with DEQ as far as their studies?
They do some sampling on select lakes. They're not every lake's selected on theirs. Like Pelican Lake is one of theirs. They check every month for toxic blue-green algae and stuff like merit. And they only have certain lakes because they're spread thin. They do the whole state, just one crew, I think. But this will be really interesting when we come out with some on the water quality and stuff like that with carp and different numbers. So with that, I will give it to Andy Glidden, and he can talk about some of the projects going on over there.
What am I pushing here for a light? That one? Over here.
And then over for the,
That one?
Yep.
Oh, this is pretty small for anybody to see. I'll apologize for that. Zach didn't mention how many carp you could leave in a watershed before you ended up with carp back in your system. 2, because it'll be a boy and it'll be a girl. If you don't get them all, then down the road you've got carp again. So that's why they're so thorough, hitting every pocket. And we found out in a lake when we didn't get it out of the weeds what happened. But anyway, 2012 was a pretty tough year. You all remember that, fires and whatnot. But when it does quit raining and we lose water out of those lakes, that's a good time to do renovations. As Zach mentioned, the cost of that chemical is about $74 a gallon. The powder's a little cheaper, about 1/3 of the cost. So if we get the more water we get out, the more your money we save. And then we just need to be really careful not to be moving fish back in that might end up getting carp started back in a lake. So if you need to be real careful with the live bait, and we have a lot of no live bait rigs after we do a renovation. So, and this is a little grainy. That lake up there on the left, that's North Twin Lakes, and that's what a lake looks like when it's time to kill carp. When you get around 200 carp per hour electrofishing and your Setchi just gets down under 20 centimeters, then it's time to spend some money, and you'll see this, that kind of looks like Zach's picture. That's right after renovation. And then you can see what it looks like when you get that out of there. That water clears up, and sometimes that doesn't take very long. So Clear Lake we renovated in 2012 in the peak of that drought stuff, but it's about 10 feet deep, 10 or 11 when it's full, and it was down about 7 when we did it. We had a few hurdles to jump that we normally don't run into. We usually try to renovate in September. It ended up being about the middle of December before we did that. Froze up a week after we renovated it. That water stayed hot, killed minnows for 7 weeks. So there might have been a lesson to learn there, and we haven't seen a carp or a bullhead in there. So knock on wood. So we did have someone that tried to get a little pan fishing back a little quicker, and they kept some crappie back somewhere, and they stocked crappie ahead of our stockings, and our stockings had a hard time getting going because I just think they were feeding crappie. But anyway, Clear Lake, which was a mud hole like that one on the upper left corner, is now Clear Lake again. So Willow Lake we did the year after that in 2013. It's about 400 acres to 12-foot max depth now. We kind of had a little resurgence we had some rain come on just before renovation, and we didn't get all the water out of the shoreline. We didn't pump like they did down here on the Refuge, and we wished we would have, but some little carp got by us, and so they're coming right back now. But we started stocking some walleye in there in 2015. So that's 4 growing seasons on that walleye right there. That's about 22.5 inches and 5 1/4 pounds. So walleye are working in that lake. Hopefully they're working on some carp and bullheads for us. So we've had a little bit of an issue on our earlier stockings with bass and perch, and I think maybe what happened to our bluegill, but we've got a bacterial gill disease in there that kind of got into some of our earlier stockings. But it seems like the walleye are getting by that. Twin Lakes south of Bassett in Rock County. That's 2 lakes right on one on top of each other. When it gets full enough, they'll join. But the North Lake's about 90 acres, the South one's 70. We started renovating all the watershed to the west and to the south in 2015. And then we renovated this lake in 2016. We found that North Lake has a unique alkalinity issue going on, and some springs we maybe didn't know about, but we did find bullheads in those lakes, but we haven't found a carp. So this renovation, on the lake itself, that's since we own access to both lakes, we paid for the chemical on that lake. All the watershed to the west and to the north, it was on private land, and it wasn't going to have public access. So the Sand Hills Task Force, through an NET grant, paid for all the chemical on that. We still did the renovation, but someone else at least was buying the chemical for that. Then here this last summer, we got in there and put in a handicap accessible ramp here and toilet. And then the North Lake has a handicap accessible ramp, but no toilet. So when these lakes fill up, and they will, and I don't know if any of you guys been down there when it gets wet, but both these county roads are underwater, we'll be able to access this North Lake up here, still put your boat in water, and you'll be able to drive to the South Lake. So that's kind of been a long time coming to get that completed. And then the other big been trial and tribulation for Twin Lakes was an outlet structure. And as you can see, when things are wet, it's pretty easy for a carp to get from A to B. And we killed carp. All this stuff up here was dry. We killed carp down here. We killed carp over here. And this runs out. Holt Creek is right up here. So it goes out through this pasture. But when it looks like this, it was hard to tell where that was at. So they did LiDAR, found out where the drainage was through there, and then talking to the landowner as well. And so we got out there this fall, actually almost Christmas, before we got it lined up to go. Had a few hurdles there as well. But this is one structure site right here. This is actually the main structure. And where the main flow is, when the water gets up about 3 foot, then it would start going out over here. So that's a natural built-in overflow to a structure. We put the main tubes in here, in the main 4 tubes, and then over here on the other side was 2 tubes. And what we put in was a slanted cement box that's a slanted grate. This is much like they have down here at Rat and Beaver, and the water flows in through the tubes from the lakeside, and has to flows through the screen, and so your carp are down here and can't get back up through that. So the main overflow structure is 4 tubes, box culverts on the back, and then this is the emergency overflow over here with 2 tubes. And the only thing that's not in there is the screens, because he needed to wait for this ice to thaw before he could get them in there. I don't think we have any carp swimming there right now. Another one of our projects that we're working on is on Long Pine Creek. We have a stretch of stream here. This is north of Long Pine. It's The total stream reach is about a mile and a half. And on this upper end up here, we've got a couple of naturally straight stretches. This because of substrate or whatever, there's a couple straight runs, and you don't get much trout habitat in straight runs. It's better to have some meander back and forth. So we're gonna go in with some rock structures and put some jetties back and forth and some what they call cross veins, and it'll get the water in this stretch coming down. It'll get it moving back and forth. When we were next to a corner or something where it was already pressure on that, we stayed away from it, and then we got back into this other straight stretch, and we'll get that water going back and forth again. This project was made possible by the Cold Water Stream Committee, and it's they actually got a Nebraska Environmental Trust grant that pays for that. So we're with the first project we did was actually on private land a little south of here, and it was kind of a precursor to what we might could do, and we wanted to see if we could benefit some of our public fishing access. This is where the structures. This is right where they're located on the area. And I have the project design of this stuff. If anybody wants to look at it a little closer, I have it with me. It's basically just using rocks to get that stream to go back and forth. Also had to before we could get equipment down there to work in the stream, because the Wildlife Division was interested in possibly being able to have an access trail along the creek to drive a pumper truck. They wanted to be able to put in a road that they can, if they got a pumper truck down the hill, they could drive up or downstream if they needed to fight a fire. So they coordinated some tree clearing. Of course, you all know what this country looks like when you don't cut trees. But they got in and opened that up right along the stream, took out cedars, left all the pines and hardwoods, a little different look, and a fella could actually, if you had the desire, you could get down on that creek with a fly rod and probably catch a trout out of those structures. So this is somebody did a little look in the Oklahoma University. Said a 12-inch cedar tree uses 42 gallons of water per day. Other estimates are near 30 gallons a day. That's when it's available. That's what they'll drink. So even after when they got in here and took these trees out, there could be that we could actually get more spring flow coming out of those side canyons that'll actually make it to the stream instead of being used up by the cedar trees. So, that'd be somebody else.
Hey, Amy, I got one question for you. You talked about funding and whatnot, and do you get your funding, or do you have somebody in-house that, well, is that their job where they solicit funding?
Yeah, we have an aquatic habitat program manager that the money you pay for on your habitat staff, your aquatic staff, we've got somebody in charge of managing that, and then he also has several other funds that he can match that with, and so he kind of, and Dean could probably talk a little more about this than me, but they actually use ours as kind of as a seed or base money, and then they can match that with other grants and funds.
So they're always out searching.
Now, the Nebraska Environmental Trust thing, I don't know if you're familiar with that work, that's an application to use that lottery money that's available. So you have to write an application to use that on individual type of grants. But the stream project thing was actually, they said, we want to work on cold water streams, we don't have any money, so they wrote for to receive one of those grants, and they did. So then that's where we're using that money. I don't think it's not to be used for, I mean, not like we can hire anybody, but we can do projects, hire consultants to do some of that stuff. And
So that's huge. That's huge.
oh yeah, yeah.
The Cool Water Stream Program, the NET together on. On our aquatic habitat program, we leverage money from 319 funds, some DQ funds, core funds, bureau funds, a variety of different funds that are available, and it's all trying to match and make as much use of those funds as possible.
Well, I think you should be applauded for that. I mean, that's
I mean, the program's done, I know we have the figures and stuff, I don't have them with me right now, but the cost figures on what we spend aquatic habitat dollars versus what projects actually cost, it's a tremendous amount of extra money that we're able to bring in. It's when we get into those things, there's a lot of additional red tape and everything that goes along with it.
Yeah, when Dean mentioned like the Dingle Johnson money and it's that tax on the fishing equipment or whatnot, that comes back to us based on how many permits we sail. So when we got into there where people wanted 3 permits, we didn't get to count those people towards permits. That influenced how much money come back to the states. If we charge them $5 per permit, then we get to count them. So that matters how much of that money comes back to the state. If we're giving them a permit, it doesn't count as a fisherman.
Thank you.
Thanks, Andy. Well, that was some of the different projects we've been working on across our district, and Andy, the Northeast District, just kind of highlight some of the stuff we're doing for the fishermen kind of in our area. That's just a small part of the stuff that we do as fisheries managers. The next step I'm going to talk about today has to do with our fish sampling. We go out and we set nets and sample, not necessarily set nets for everything, but we go out and sample the existing fish populations in our public water bodies, and we provide information to the public, which is our survey results. So a few of you guys were looking at this earlier. This is compiled of all of our surveys that were conducted this year statewide. And in this presentation, I'm just going to talk about more specific the lakes that we have here in the northwest part of the state. I didn't get any of Andy's data for the Northeast District, just the Northwest District, which goes to Cherry County. Anything over into Bassett and your area.
Yeah, I don't have a web thing coming out here before long.
But if you want more specifics on his lakes, they're going to be in this publication as well. Start off, I'm going to talk a little bit about different types of surveys that we do. For our pelagic fisheries, such as walleye, channel catfish, white bass, we sample them typically in the fall using a gill net. Our nearshore species, your yellow perch, your bluegill, your crappies, northern pike, with those shoreline-oriented type species, we sample those typically in the springtime. Try to target closer towards the spawns, and we use frame nets for those. And then our largemouth bass, we'll go out and we'll sample at night using electric fishing. We'll start off talking about our walleye catches for the year. So in the Northwest District, we had some pretty good walleye catches for this year. Merritt was our top lake this year with a little over 60 walleye per gill net. We had a good size structure, a lot of fish over 20 inches. Lake Winters Creek, which is another one further west, the Panhandle, had an excellent walleye catch, almost 50 per net. If you look at how our lakes compare statewide, we have 4 of the top 5 gill net catches for abundance were all out in our area. So we have some excellent walleye fishing out in this area this year. Size structure wise, we have some pretty good fisheries coming up. Channel catfish, not all of our lakes are sampled every year either. I forgot to mention that part. We try to sample the majority of them, but they're usually on a rotation. So most lakes get sampled at least once every 3 years. So these are just the ones that we sampled in 2018. If you see one that's missing, it's probably because it was an off year for that. So channel catfish in 2018, we sampled 5 lakes. Big Alkali had the highest catch in our district with 17 catfish per gill net. We have good size structure for fish over 24 inches in most of our lakes. A lot of times our gill net catch is pretty low in our bigger reservoirs, such as Merritt. That may be due to the size of the reservoir. However, if you want to look for big catfish in our area, typically we're going to look at our bigger water bodies. So Merritt typically produces channel catfish over 15 pounds pretty regularly. Other lakes we have that produce really quality catfish include Minutair and Box Butte Reservoir. Even though it wasn't sampled this year, we caught quite a few really big catfish this past season. White bass fishing. In the Northwest, we don't have a lot of fisheries that have good white bass populations. The three that you have opportunities out here include Lake Minutair. You can catch them at Merritt, even though the population is pretty low. It's typically more of a quality white bass when you do get into them. And then Whitney Lake has a decent white bass population, but wasn't surveyed in 2018. So if you want to look for white bass, you got to move a little bit east. Davis Creek actually had the highest abundance statewide. I just want to point out a couple of these for you. Swanson Reservoir was also very good, and even though Harlan's not real high, it was a pretty good white bass fishery this past year, even though the survey didn't indicate it. These guys can kind of be hit or miss in our gill nets since they school up pretty tight. So even if they're a little bit lower on here, doesn't mean it's going to be a poor catch rate for the year. It may just be that our surveys didn't detect them as well as we would hope for the season. Northern pike. The Northwest has some pretty good pike fishing. Abundance-wise, Dewey Lake had the highest catch rates this past spring, especially for pike over 20 inches. The majority of the pike were in that 21 to 28 inch mark, under that, with some opportunity over 34 inches. You notice a lot of our pike fisheries across the state here, across the Northwest, have pike opportunities for some pretty big ones. Box Butte is another one of our quality pike fisheries. It typically has a lot of smaller pike in it, but still has opportunities for pike over 34 inches. A couple pike lakes I wanted to mention. They're kind of up and coming. Crescent Lake here, it's one that we've introduced pike, trying to help control our carp numbers, and they're doing very well in there. We're starting to see some really fat pike over 22 inches. Most of these are actually pushing that 26 to 28 inch mark on that blue mark there. So there's other opportunities across the state other than just around here in Valentine. But we do have some pretty good pike fishing going on. Bluegills. Fry Lake had our highest abundance of bluegills in 2018, especially for bluegills over 8 inches. And if you want to try to find a bluegill over 10 inches, Fry Lake's probably one of our top destinations. As you notice here, a lot of our best bluegill lakes as far as abundance are all carp-free fisheries. So they do really well in lakes that don't have common carp. A lot of our sandhill lakes have a lower abundance compared to what you see in the statewide surveys, but yet our quality is pretty good in our sandhill lakes. Yellow perch. Crane Lake had the highest abundance of yellow perch in 2018. This is kind of a new fishery. We just started stocking a couple years ago and have excellent growth rates. And as you notice, the red bar here, the 5 to 8 inch yellow perch, that's just a big year class coming on with it. This is a carp-free system that we just got approval to start stocking again. Most of our perch fisheries are right around just under 20 per frame net. Home Valley is probably one of our better perch fisheries for Sandhill Lake, and I think a lot of that attributes to the tough access trying to get there. These guys are pretty susceptible to fishing pressure, and we see that a lot in our surveys. Following a real good bite, it may take a few years to get those populations built back up again. Crappies. Clear Lake had the highest catch crappies in 2018. Although a lot of those crappies were pretty small, under 8 inches. Conway Stevenson's another one that I'd send people to for crappie fishing. A lot of these crappies were right around that 10 to 11 inch mark. We just started stocking gizzard shad in that lake this past year, and the body quality on these crappies have really improved. We got some pretty good crappie fishing across the area. Anglers looking for larger crappies should concentrate on Home Valley. It has a big year class that we stocked back, I think it was 2012. And these crappies are pushing right around that 13 inch mark right now. real nice looking fish. Largemouth bass. Fry Lake continues to have one of the highest catch rates of largemouth bass in 2018. We're just over 250 per hour electrofishing. Duck Lake on the Refuge was our second highest. And once again, like bluegill, these lakes that are carp free typically have our highest abundance. Although with our sandhill lakes, we get pretty good growth rates, and we do have largemouth bass over 15 inches in most of our sandhill lakes available. Now we do a lot of other catch a lot of other fish and have other opportunities within our district. Some that we don't necessarily target, but are also documented. So if somebody wants to go out fishing for some of these other species, we don't have the trend data like we do on some other more managed species, more target species. But if there's questions for it, I just encourage people to contact our office and talk to us about it. Can I get you to step up to the microphone at all? We had a comment that it's kind of hard to hear the questions.
My question is, did you guys stock green sunfish into Watts?
Green sunfish, no. Green sunfish are a native species in the sandhills.
Did you stock them into Hudson?
No.
Well, we've been catching those out of both of those two bodies of water. I was just curious.
Yeah, they're probably native in the system.
They're native to the sandhills, so I mean, they could be anywhere. I assume at Watts we missed a little smaller water body like I was showing you on Pelican, somewhere there. Right. That's why we're seeing a few of those green sunfish, bullheads, grass pickerel.
They're just about as tough as bullheads when you're trying to kill them in a renovation, and they don't have to be in much water to get by.
Right.
I just had a quick question on
Sure.
the gill net situation. What's the death rate on the gill nets? Is there a better way to do it without killing any of those?
Well, it seems like colder the water temperatures, the less mortality we have on our gill nets. But the number of fish that actually die during a gill net survey is very minimal for our trend data and do our science on it compared to what even a 1 day on a good bite is on most of our reservoirs. So one other species I wanted to point out that we get a lot of phone calls on, I thought I'd just kind of throw the graph up on it for out here, is our black bullheads. This is one of those species that surprisingly we get a lot of questions on every year. So I just thought I'd throw this slide up to show kind of where our bullhead catch was for the year. And Crescent Lake was a pretty good catch for bullheads. And they don't compete real well when we have a good fishery going. So you notice some of these lakes here. Watts Lake is one that it was freshly renovated, and we might have missed some of them. That's why they did so well until we get the game fish up and going real well. So we got a year class in there of bullheads coming on. Crescent Lake, even following renovation in 2008, we had a lot of carp and rough fish come on that we kind of had some winter kill issues on it too. So we kind of got these out of balance fisheries where we kind of start seeing our bullheads. But if people are looking for opportunities, I'd probably send them to Crescent would be one for catching some bullheads right now. But does anybody have any questions right off the bat for fishing forecast?
And
One more real quick.
the pike are back in there. What about the carp? Have you seen any carp?
In which one?
With Watts? No.
No.
I haven't seen carp yet.
No. Okay. We'll move on, talk a little bit about our regulations. Dean?
Just one quick question. Maybe you're gonna cover this later. Are you gonna talk about, how you plan on restocking the refuge lakes?
We can talk about that at the end.
Yeah,
Okay.
it'd probably be easiest.
Thank you.
This last year, in our October commission meeting, we introduced some different regulation changes. Some of our regulations are in what's called orders, and some is in regulation. Bag limits, seasons, and size limits are in orders, which simply require commission approval. The other regulations are have to be approved through the Attorney General's office and the governor. So I'm going to kind of go through some of these. Some of the reasons we're changing some of this stuff on our trout is we're trying to encourage some additional harvest on our brown trout and protect our brook trout. That's why we've separated those out. We got a lot of streams where we have a high population of brown trout, and we're not getting really good growth on them. And we'd like to encourage some harvest on some of those to kind of reduce the numbers. We'll also be doing some removal on some of those areas. Some of the research has found that brown trout don't move a whole lot up in a stream. If you remove them out of the area, it takes a while for them to come back. So we're hoping to get some size growth out of this. And that's one reason we did that. Also, on Soldiers Creek Wilderness area, we got a daily bag limit of 2. And then like our brook trout are naturally reproducing in our streams, and we want to protect those and have a bag limit of 2 on those. Our black bass. For those of you that ever fish the canal system down around North Platte, know that there's a lot of smallmouth bass in that system, and they're all pretty consistent in size, and they're small. And so we took the minimum size limit off to try and, again, encourage some harvest on some of those things to try and see if we can't increase that size structure. I started off a long time ago working at the North Platte Hatchery, and at that point in time, you could go down to the canal on the tail race there, and you could catch smallmouth after smallmouth on a small spinner, and they were all pretty consistent, 6 to 8 inches. And you can still do that same thing today. There's no change in that size structure in that system. So we're just trying to, again, open that up to encourage some additional harvest and allow some opportunity there. Just a few changes there on minimum length of 21 on some lakes down around Lincoln and in southeast Nebraska. Walleye sauger, we simply changed the location of the size limit for Harlan County to the bridge on the 183. It opens up about 30 miles of stream. We're trying to make it consistent with some of our channel catfish regulations. Pelican Lake, that's the big change at the Refuge. Daily bag of 5 on Pelican with only 1 fish 10 inches or greater. We're trying to get that big bluegill population back, that trophy bluegill opportunity in Pelican Lake that we used to have. We can't do it with a lot of predator fish in there, and we've done a lot of research on the Sandhill Lakes, and that's something that we want to try and make sure that we can do that. We hope that the anglers will give us a chance to try this and make it work. If it doesn't work, we can always go back in with our predator fish, but we know we can't produce them with predators there. Northern pike. Again, we went for some consistency here. Daily bag limit of 3 and not more than 1 fish over 34 inches. We removed Goose Lake from that exception. We're going to be renovating Goose Lake whenever the water level goes down in there. Yes?
When you say predator fish, would bass be included in that?
Not as much so, no. Northern pike are such that we've shown in our Sandhill Lake studies that the northern pike have more of an impact on our panfish than the bass.
So you'll be stocking the largemouth bass into Pelican then?
Yes.
Okay, but not the northern pike?
Not the northern.
Okay.
And again, we ask that the anglers give us a chance to make this work. Box Butte is an exception on the northern pike. We're trying to encourage some harvest of some of those smaller northern pike. We got a lot of fish in there, and the regulation, it's 10 fish, only 3 over 22 inches, and only 1 over 34. And then we changed the minimum length limit on the number of lakes to try and make it consistent to the 34 inches. We're trying to create some consistency in our regulations and get rid of some unnecessary regulations as we go through this. Two Rivers, we put smallmouth bass into Two Rivers a number of years ago into the trout lake. Somebody had helped us out and introduced a lot of goldfish, and goldfish do what they do best, and therefore we had lots of goldfish. And so we introduced smallmouth bass in there. We tried brown trout initially that didn't really have an impact. The smallmouth bass have done great. However, with the regulations in Two Rivers Trout Lake, you had to have a trout tag, and it was only open at certain times. So in order to provide opportunities for additional anglers and additional fishing, we opened it up without a trout tag so they can go in and fish for the smallmouth bass. It's pretty much all catch and release. And on the catch and release lakes, most all these are in the eastern part of the state. Really don't impact anything in this end. Bullfrogs. Bullfrogs are one of those things, you either like them or you don't. They're good eating. In the western part of the state, west of Highway 81, we opened this to year-round season, all harvest methods that are legal, and the bag and possession limit will remain the same. East of 81, it's still the 4.5-inch length limit. Once our regulations pass through the governor's office, gigs and archery will be allowed on bullfrogs out here. They're an invasive species. They kind of are like a typhoid Mary on diseases like chytrid fungus, to where they are a carrier, but it doesn't kill them, and it impacts a lot of other amphibians. So they're also a predator of smaller frogs, fish, a lot of things. Mussels, we're trying to introduce a lot of native freshwater mussels to the state. These aren't the invasive mussels that you see advertised all the time, the zebra mussels. These are native mussels where we're reintroducing them into some of our streams. We're producing these things in the hatchery, and they got a really cool life cycle. It's something that is really neat, and we're actually having some success of reintroducing them into our streams, seeing growth in those streams where they used to be years ago and they're no longer there for whatever reason. The life cycle is really cool on them, and it could go into a lot of information on those. Anticipated changes. These are changes that are in our regulations that have not yet passed the governor's desk. So until they do, these really don't fall into play, and we'll put a news release out when they do. They're not in our fishing guide because of that. We're going to make it unlawful to transport fish or bait fish in water from any stream, river, lake, or pond. That way, we reduce the risk of moving invasive species. We kind of clarified some of our archery regulations. Those are basically what those are. It's just a clarification of what we had there before. Paddlefish archery. We have what's called Pci Compliance. And what that means is our banking system that the state has, we can only hold your credit card for 7 days. So when you apply for a paddlefish tag, you pay the application fee. But then you've got to come back and submit again and pay for your permit. We can't collect it all at once. So what we're trying to do is put some regulation in place to where if somebody turns down their paddlefish permit that they drew, we got enough people that still want a paddlefish permit. We're trying to make it to where we provide that opportunity to everybody instead of no longer having that permit available to anybody. And it's simply clarifying some of those. And again, once these things pass, those will go out into a news release. Andy mentioned the live bait thing. Most of these are in the eastern part of the state on lakes that are brand new, like Duck Creek down here. Worspan, we did a low-dose renovation. Stagecoach, we did a renovation. Conestoga is a rehab project. Cunningham, we drained because of zebra mussels, and we're trying to kill them off through the freeze. And this weather here, I think we're doing a pretty good job. I'm ready for it to be over, and let's move on to spring. Flanagan's a brand new lake in Omaha. Kirkpatrick is one that did. Milham is one that we anticipated doing, but it hasn't happened yet. How many of you received this survey, either through an email or through mail? Anybody? You did? You did? Did you guys turn them in? Because this is something that's going to help us as we move forward to try and understand, what our anglers want. A little over 10,000 of these went out. We had about a 28.9% return so far, which on surveys is really good. We're still evaluating it. Not all the results are been tabulated yet, but this is, along with a couple other surveys have been done. We're trying to compile this information. We're seeing some trends changes. We do this supposedly every 5 years, give or take a few. And what we're seeing is some changes in trends of what we've seen in years past. And we'll try and evaluate some of those and see. I think we're going to see some changes on preferred species. We're going to see some changes on who uses our parks and fish, who, you know, where they fish, streams or rivers, lakes. So we're going to see some changes in that. So I wanted to throw that out. This is very important as far as us learning a little more about our anglers and what's going on. Now, this is the important part to me, because this is an opportunity for you guys to ask questions, to make comments. We're doing a number of these public meetings across the state. We'll be in Lexington tomorrow night. We'll be in Sydney next Monday night, Ogallala next Tuesday night. We've already been to Norfolk, Omaha, and Lincoln. So we're doing a number of these across the state. We'll be compiling everything and reporting to our commissioners of what we're finding in each location, you know, what the main interests are. We did this the last 2 years, and I can tell you that we're seeing some changes in what our anglers are looking for, not only across the state, but also region by region. And this is an opportunity for you guys. And again, I realize most of you guys are avid anglers. You have a strong interest. You have to keep in mind that a lot of our anglers are not that. They're occasional anglers. They're not out there all the time. And we have to satisfy their needs also. So it's a tough thing to try and manage some of these fisheries to satisfy everybody, from the catch and release crowd to harvest all you can and eat. So we're kind of caught in the middle sometimes, but again, this part here is really important as far as getting your guys' input. It's very valuable to us. And with that, we'll open it up to questions.
First, I have a comment. I want to thank the Game and Parks personally for the renovation projects. I think it's great for the future, and what I've seen happening out south on the Refuge is so positive, especially for our youth, and I really appreciate that part of it. Couple questions. One is the rat and beaver. I didn't hear anything about that, how that project is coming along. I haven't had the opportunity to. There's too many body of waters to fish. but
that's tough.
It's a tough deal. Yeah, but and then the other side of the story is, when you renovate a lake, like on the Refuge, is there ever an opportunity on the east side of the lake to open up some of those to take some pressure off on a rotation basis? Because it's amazing the amount of fishing that's done out here, more so in the wintertime, you know, but that would be something. I didn't know if that was a joint adventure that we could do with the federal government to possibly fish the east side of the highway. I mean, access, currently, you know, we have to walk unless you got a handicap permit. Just give me one spot and I'll walk.
Well, first off, on the renovations, one thing that Zach didn't mention is basically within 24 hours, Pelican Lake went from what you were seeing in those pictures to clear water. The clarity was tremendous. We really appreciate your comments, and we're doing what we can to try and encourage youth and new anglers to come into it, and it's a lot of effort and stuff, but it's something that we feel very, very strongly about. Zach can probably answer rat and beaver better than I can.
Yeah, to kind of answer your question, we're not really sure what's going on with rat and beaver. We sampled it the first year following the initial stockings. Everything looked good. Our bluegill, perch, crappie, everything looked good. The way we sample during the spring, we're usually messing with a lot of weather. We could have missed them the last couple of years, but we are seeing some perch numbers in there. We're not seeing our crappie and bluegill, but if you know, you ever been to rat and beaver, it's really, really shallow on the edges and very, very tough to trap net. We're probably going to go in this year, but possibly with some smaller, shorter experimental mesh gill nets just to make sure we got fish in there. And we are also doing some more stockings in there just to try to bump up that population. I believe Don can allude to it a little bit more, but on fry, it was quite a few years before we got the carp out of fry, but it was quite a few years before we seen that panfish population really explode. So I'm still hoping. So we haven't sampled the carp there yet. So
One follow-up question that
Okay.
too, when you talk about the perch population, I can remember back in the 80s and 90s, the perch population out here, and I kind of contribute that to the fact is once a perch gets to a certain length that people think they can clean, they're going to clean it because they don't like to clean bluegills versus the perch. So do you do any extra stocking on the perch side of things?
it depends on the water body, but our lakes that we think we know are good perch habitats. Rat and beaver is one of them. Hackberry is going to be another one. We are putting in extra perch, actually 2 initial year classes, to try to bump up those populations and really get those perch going in some of those systems. So
I just want to say something this is just an observation from being out and about for a while, but we take these lakes that are full of carp, and they're not growing a stitch of vegetation because the carp have destroyed all that. We time these renovations at low water or we pump them down to get the best go at killing the carp. So then we kill the carp, they clear up, and we have a lake out there that might only be 5, 6, 7 foot deep, and then we have a pile of birds migrating north or south, white or black, that eat fish. And I think that's what decimated. We can protect those fish when they're in the hatchery, but when we put them out in the pond, out in the lake, they're fair game. And I think that, because we've lost fish population out of lake that should have, they're coming on, looking good, and then they were gone. And it wasn't fishing. And Dean's been kind of trying to lead the charge on doing something about that, but yeah.
I think more will come out of it. That EPA carp grant study I got going on is a 3-year project where they're documenting different types of waterfowl on these water bodies may lead up into some of them studies they've studied in the glacial lakes, losing total perch populations from cormorants.
So what depth of water would prevent that from occurring, do you believe?
What vegetation, these are all bare vegetation, so when that water comes up and we grow vegetation, then they've got some protection. They got a place to hide.
Like Watts right now, there probably couldn't be a pelican go find a fish in that place.
The bird issue is a problem, and it's a problem across the country here. And it's not a problem that we're addressing by ourselves. You see it from north to south and up in New York State and everything. So it's an issue that is there. The Fish and Wildlife Service was sued here a while back, and it's really limited on what can be done in a lot of situations. As far as opening up additional lakes in the refuge, this is something under discussion, and it has been for some time, and I'm sure it will continue to be. But, we would like to see an increase in some of the areas, especially, if nothing else, just for ice fishing. We feel that probably would have the least impact on anything. But again, that's something we're working with our partners down there, and there is an executive order out through a former Secretary Zinke, and I think it's still in effect and stuff to open up more areas to hunting and fishing. I think you're going to see more of the refuge open to hunting as time goes over the next few years.
So what would be the limiting factor?
To opening more up?
Right. What would be the reason not to at this point?
Different viewpoints.
So it's just opinions, it's not.
It's a waterfowl refuge. It's not a fishing area as such. It's a waterfowl refuge, and that's the way it's managed. But there's always opportunities.
Well, like I say, the ice fishing would have absolutely no impact on the waterfowl.
Right. And that's something that's under discussion, and that's something that we will continue to push for. And it's been pushed for quite a few years, and I'd really like to see it happen at some point. But again, that's something we have to maintain a good partnership with the Fish and Wildlife Service, and we will continue to. And Zach, I give a lot of credit to him as far as that great relationship that we have. And I think we'll continue to move forward. And I think eventually we'll see it. Any other questions?
Yes, sir. This is probably a question for you, but on Twin Lakes, are you putting pike back in there? I remember a few years ago, they had huge crappie and huge pike.
Yeah, there, right now, bass, bluegill, perch and crappie, would like to take advantage of some of that perch growth before we go back to that pike mode, so, because as we found out from our studies on these refuge lakes, if we put pike back in there, they're really gonna put it pretty well on all panfish, bluegill as well, but primarily perch, that's just a nice, easy meal.
They're perfect shape.
We wouldn't do it, I mean, I like to catch pike as well as the next guy, maybe more, but if we would wait for a while and let those perch kind of take off and the bluegill too, then we can maybe have some of that fishing. If that satisfies anglers, then maybe we won't do the pike. Just have to see where it goes.
And I'm with you, I like pike too, and I'm from Lincoln, so we don't have much pike fishing, which is why I come up here. This is probably one of the greatest hidden gems in the Midwest. We show people, my girlfriend loves to come up and ice fish for pike, and she shows people from Minnesota and South Dakota pictures of the fish she catches out of here, and they can't believe it's Nebraska. It's an amazing fishery. And one of the questions that I have is for down the road after the renovations. I know there's gonna be no pike in Pelican, correct?
Correct.
And is the plan also no pike in Hackberry?
At this time, yes.
Okay, so two of the bigger lakes that hold trophy pike will no longer hold pike.
At this time.
Okay. I understand that you wanna have trophy bluegill in Pelican. What's the rationale for taking Hackberry?
We would like to give these panfish, like you're saying, opportunities and judge it. I mean, look at them right off the bat of which way we go with pike or something like in Hackberry. But you also have to realize Clear Lake's been full of carp for a number of years. Some of you guys that have been around here, and it's just clear full of carp. Once we renovate that lake's going to be a phenomenal pike fishery, and it's not a pike fishery. I mean, there's a few pike and a few anglers that do go there, but that lake's going to produce a ton of pike. And Dewey, once those lakes are renovated, they're going to be some phenomenal pike fisheries, in my opinion. So, but we will keep our.
I'm old enough to remember how good Clear used to be.
Yep. So.
And Dewey's always been good. I guess the concern I have as a pike fisherman is all right now, if you don't put a road and a ramp in the Willow, every pike fisherman that fishes out of a boat is gonna get shoved onto two lakes. And the two biggest lakes aren't gonna be among those. And I guess I just don't quite understand, from everybody that I talk to from the eastern part of the state that comes up here, they don't come up here for panfish. I realize there are trophy panfish in Pelican. The people from Lincoln don't come up here for that. They'll fish it if they're here, but they come up here for the pike. And I guess, I just see it as,
See, but that wasn't the case 30 years ago. And I like pike, but I held a bluegill in my hands in Pelican Lake 30 years ago. When we laid it in the bottom of a 5-gallon bucket, you couldn't see the bottom of the 5-gallon bucket.
and I used to catch
That doesn't happen.
I used to catch
just
crappie
doesn't
like that
happen.
in Twin Lakes, and it's a shame when they go away.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm talking about, you didn't have trophy, now you got trophy pike here. These are trophy pike, these are 40-plus inch pike. Where else in the state are you gonna catch them? Again, I realize, you want those, you want those.
Nebraska Lake Refuge is now in. Yeah. Nebraska Lake's a 1,000-acre lake.
Again, I
It's
know,
now online with pike.
okay, I know you want
Lake.
the big bluegill, but why, I guess my question is, why take out two of the lakes for big bluegill?
One of the things we're looking at right now, we stock panfish initially. You got to get those panfish populations building up. If you stock pike right on top of them initially, you're going to wipe out your panfish populations. You don't have the bigger ones. You don't have them reproducing and adding to the forage for your northern pike. So first of all, we've got to try the panfish for a while, and we'll see how it goes. So.
And if it doesn't go, then we can change.
Yep.
You can always add that down the road. Once you commit to that, then it's the only way you get out of it is a renovation, so.
Well, then I guess the next questions along those lines that I have are the timing, because as I understand this, you're gonna do Hackberry this year, you're gonna do Dewey in 2020, and then the last 3 in 2021. When you stock pike back in, I mean, what's the growth rate and what size of pike are you gonna stock? Because if if I'm looking at that timeline and you don't put any pike back in until after you do Dewey, basically you're not gonna really have any pike fishing in the refuge for quite a few years.
There'll be some because we're moving those adult fish down the system right now, like I showing on Pelican. When we get down the bottom system, we're probably going to take those adults back to somewhere. So there'll be some. The northern pike have phenomenal growth rates. Joe can allude to some of that. He does some age and growth on some of them, but it won't take long.
And I think you'll see that in a newly renovated lake, like some of these that we're doing, you're gonna see tremendous growth potential on these northern pike when they go in. Go
We
ahead.
were at Watts and we're already seeing northern pike in Watts.
Is that from people moving them?
They're in there,
Hard telling.
yeah.
We tried doing some removal efforts in the spring. It's about to the point, it'll be interesting to know this spring, but we're about to the point where it's not physically possible to remove them. We do it out of West Long too. It's always had a pike population. We keep on it. We're in there in the spring running yellow perch spawning nets, trying to get our yellow perch brood. So we're in there at the time the pike are spawning, and we usually move them to a different lake. So.
But I have to agree with you on Pelican, that is just an amazing fishery in relation to trophy, bluegill. You know, if that's done correctly, and that's keeping the northerns out of there, because that's just a huge.
See, maybe we'll have to think about that twin lake. If we don't see a big perch or crappie boom off on that, and we've got a void over here to fill with these refuge lakes going on, maybe that would be some reason to think about getting pike back in twin lakes. And then
We'd
have that fishery, to take some of the, what's going on over here.
We definitely understand there needs to be pike opportunities, and quite a few of them. We do get a lot of anglers, you know, that come out.
Yeah,
But
I don't
yep.
want you guys to think I'm not.
No.
I love the carp removal.
Yep.
You know, I remember when Clear Lake was actually Clear Lake.
Yeah,
And you can catch, you know, giant pike, and you can see your spinnerbait 30 yards off.
and that lake's going to be phenomenal once we get the vegetation back and the depth on that lake. It's the deepest lake we got out there, and I think the cool water habitat for northern pike, it's going to be a really good
We're
lake.
at the
So.
southern edge of Pike Range. These shallow sandhill lakes, 5, 6, 7 foot deep, and you come electric fish or whatever, however if you're electric fishing for bass, and you'd see pike up on those springs. But I used to try to age some pike out of these sandhill lakes. I kind of gave it up because I think they had 2 annulus formations instead of 1, because they slowed down in the summer when it got so damn hot. They're a cool water fish. That water got so hot, they'd actually lay down an annulus that you couldn't hardly determine from a winter annulus. I mean, I almost think they grew better in the winter than they did in the summer. So, I mean, it's dang hard to read a pike scale. I mean, there's almost like they got 2 instead of 1. So these shallow lakes, you know, if they warm up in the summer, and it's pretty tough for those fish to grow in those. Whereas a Clear Lake with that deeper water, then they've got that thermal refuge. They've got a place to go get out of that hot water. So that's why that's gonna grow some monster pike.
And then just real quick on Pelican, I don't know anything about panfish growth rates or anything, because in Lincoln, we can go to farm ponds and catch panfish, not like you're describing, but that's just everybody wants pike. The growth rate on the panfish, how long do you anticipate Pelican will take before it's a quality fishery?
3 years. Watts Lake, we renovated in 2015. Right now in 2019, we have bluegill over 8 inches, crappie between 10 and 11, and perch pushing 11 inches, and 3.5 growing seasons. So, I mean, they're pretty phenomenal.
9-inch bluegills out of Watts right now.
Yeah, so, I mean, they're pretty phenomenal growth rates on these systems once you start them over and get the carp out of them, so. Time-
Pelican could even be better.
Yeah,
Mark?
yep.
Yeah, I've got a question on, there's quite a few fishermen come up for trophy northern pike fishing. And previously on the refuge, it's been 28 or less you could keep. And that protected all larger fish. I guess I'm somewhat concerned that with the one fish over 34, unless northern pike fishermen practice catch and release, it's gonna be taking those larger fish out of the lakes.
I
second that.
understand.
Go back to 28.
The-
Yeah, well, if you wanna protect the trophy pike fishery, I
And we mainly did it to simplify regulations across the state, but also on my survey data, if you look at any of those lakes, 90% of your fish are under 28 inches. So I think once we renovate these systems, I think you're going to see some phenomenal growth rates like you did back in the day. Time will tell, but we'll definitely look at it, and if it's not working, we can do something. Yeah. So.
I think there's, back on the pipe, just Dewey, Clear, and Willow. You haven't got access to Willow. Clear is, you only can fish, basically the best fishing is on the east end.
Right now.
Right now. And you get 5 boats on that east end, you're crowded.
It'll be vegetated. The vegetation.
Jackberry all out of there and everything. Everything's gonna be on Dewey, it's gonna be crowded, it's already crowded. It's just, you just ruin it for.
I know. Yep.
I think that's part of the renovation process, though. You gotta go through some growing pains to get where you wanna be.
Sure.
You know,
Sure.
So, and I, again, applaud you guys for where you're headed and where it's going, because by the time you get the carp out of there and get that clear vegetation, and in 5 years or 10 years down the road, it'll be an unbelievable fishery.
And one thing we're looking at is trying 2 lakes at the upper end of the watershed without northern pike. We already got them in Watts. We don't know if we didn't kill them in the renovation. We don't know if they were in the watershed. We don't know if somebody put them in there. But if somebody, we've already had people say they would put them in for us. If they put them in Hackberry and Pelican, we don't, I mean, hopefully we get the carp out, and that's all we're asking, so.
Can I ask you a question about that? Just thinking about a couple $1 million for Pelican, and there's an obvious constituency that would like to see pike back in Pelican, and there's a 2-track road, it's a mile long, and kind of like the carp it takes 2. Is there gonna be some sort of elevated compliance or like messaging or anything to basically get that message across to protect their investment and trust you guys and see that through?
You know, we will try, and we've already tried with some of our information that we put out to try and let our constituents know what we're trying to do. We're simply asking that we're given a chance on this. Anybody can screw it up. I mean, that's a possibility. We deal with that every day on our lakes. Anybody can mess it up. That's why we go with no live bait rigs, is because most people cannot identify fish. They go out and collect their bait, they don't have a clue what they have. They have minnows. Anything this size is a minnow. And it's the same way with zebra mussels. All it takes is one boat and it screws it up for everybody. And we have to work as a group. Everybody has differing opinions. And this is just, look, 20-some people in here, and you got differing opinions on what to do. Take that for the total number of anglers we have, and you're gonna multiply that. At Norfolk Public Meeting, we had an ice storm, which was really wonderful because it created a nice layer of ice on everything and made it interesting getting there and getting home. But we had 11 people there, 12 people, I'm sorry, and I asked, what species do you prefer to fish for? And let me tell you, I got the gamut. I got the whole gamut. So trying to get everybody to agree to one thing is hard. And what we're trying to do is take 1 or 2 lakes here to try and make something special. And I realize that people like pike, people are different wherever you go. If you go to South Dakota, white bass are trash fish. Us Nebraskans will go up there and fish because we love them. Minnesota, rock bass. Who would eat those? They're a great fish. But the people from other states go there and target them. It's different for different people and what they like. Eastern Nebraska, they like pike because we really can't grow good pike in eastern Nebraska. Like Andy says, it's a temperature thing. Out here, there's people that hate pike. And, so you get the whole gamut. And we're stuck here in the middle trying to make sure everybody's happy. And we're not going to make everybody happy. But we're going to try and produce the best quality fisheries that we can. And in some cases, it's a favorite lake. It's going to change. I have my favorite fish, other people have their favorite fish. I'm kinda often the clear left compared to a lot of the other guys in fisheries on what I like, but I'm okay with that, because then they don't bother me. You know, but the thing is, we all have our favorite, and we all have what we'd like to catch. And sometimes we have to make some adjustments to do what we wanna do. And, you know, everybody can remember that is from around here on what Pelican used to be for bluegill. And the number of states that that trophy fishery drew was tremendous. I think we've got probably one of the top muskie fisheries in the country out at Merritt Reservoir here. You can go and target them. Now, people hate them and people love them. Depends on who you are. But there are some trophy fish there, and they're easy to catch compared to the fish of 10,000 casts up in Minnesota. And I mean, we net them every spring, and there's some really big muskie in there. It's opportunity on what you want to take. And, you know, so we just have to move forward. And I realize we're not going to make everybody happy, but we're going to try and do what we can. And that's why we're here. So.
But I appreciate the fact that you're capitalizing on each body of water, each lake, each opportunity to have the biggest fish and the best habitat for that particular species. And I think, you know, I applaud you for that.
We try, and I mean, because we can make cookie cutter lakes to where everything is exactly the same and probably create a real nice mediocre fishery. And we're trying to create some trophy opportunities here. And again, we're just asking to give it some patience and give us an opportunity to move forward.
Well, from a public relations aspect, how do you get that message across? I mean, how are you able to do that?
That's up to Justin.
I guess that's what my comment was too, is in no way critical of what you're doing. I think it's wonderful, and I was just thinking about the person who hasn't listened to the radio or seen the TV or whatever. We know that they're gonna be out on the road between Pelican and Dewey Lake, and maybe just having something at the ramp that lets them, you know, see that story and where you're hoping.
And that's something we could try. You know, we did a survey this last year out at the Refuge lakes. We did a use survey, and I mean, we went through anglers, bird watchers, hunters, you know, just drive-throughs, whatever, and compiled comments and everything. So we tried really hard to kind of get the full gamut. Typically, when you ask for comments in a situation like that, you get what you really kind of think you're going to get. And there's some really interesting ones. But you have to take that in consideration. And I really think that, you know, we have to look at it and figure out how we do get that information out the best. And like I said, we're not gonna make everybody happy, and all it's gonna take is one person.
Daryl Bauer, our outreach program manager, does an excellent job. He's on the internet, on forums and stuff all the time, explaining what we do and how we're doing it and going about it. He does a really good job for us.
He does an excellent job with that. He's getting the word out as much as we can.
Does Nebraska Land Magazine do anything for you to help you?
Yeah, they did a really great article on the bluegill potential at Pelican here a year ago, or whatever. It was a fantastic article.
I'd like to, after you get these remedied, like to see more law enforcement maybe. Right now, I don't think we see enough out there. So we have rules, we need to make sure they're being followed.
I agree, and that's a comment that I can honestly say we've heard at every public meeting we've had so far. And it's been consistent across the board. And just because you don't always see an officer doesn't mean there hasn't been a contact. Officers have this knack of being able to usually tell when somebody's doing something wrong and when they're doing it right. And that's probably when I was growing up that I got stopped you know. I wasn't ever doing anything wrong, but I think I always had a guilty look or something. Either that or the guy I was fishing with, hunting with. But, you know, they have that knowledge and they know what to look for. And so just because you see them doesn't mean they're not there, but we do need more law enforcement. I'll agree 100%.
Here's another comment on that. These fishermen, you guys are out there probably more than our law enforcement can make the rounds to all these areas. They can't be everywhere at once. So if you see something that you think isn't right, make sure you contact the local ward. Let them know about it so they can be aware of it.
Phone numbers are in our fishing guide.
I think the refuge just a little different. I think you could watch a little bit. I had experience last year where I did notify somebody and it was, you know, can you have one up here? Although that weekend, well, she wasn't working and the person that was didn't even know how to get to Dewey Lake, so.
And we're gonna deal with that, you know, but the thing is, it's also, when we get these reports, it's an area that law enforcement will target in the future. It doesn't mean that necessarily they're gonna target everywhere, but if we get complaints in an area, it may be a special area that they target, and when they target an area, trust me, they do a good job of targeting it. I think we have some very excellent conservation officers in this state and some very dedicated people out there that some of our new guys are just tremendous. In fact, to the point of having some people feel we have too much presence in some areas.
They're spread pretty thin.
Yes, they're spread very thin.
We cover huge areas. You know, I got 7,000 square miles, basically by myself. Refuge officer, you know, she's here, she's there, you know, during end of December for a couple weeks, January, she was down on the border with border protection, you know.
She has several different refuges she's in charge
Yeah.
of, so,
Yeah.
but I understand what you're saying.
We have a limited federal presence in the state.
And they're busy a lot in the summertime and they don't have.
And we
Yeah.
even get that as fisheries guys, pull up there in game parks and they wanna show you your license and stuff, and just the presence out there, you know, is gonna help the thing get around and whatever, so.
Yes, sir.
As much as I hate signs, is there some way you can post, like, if there's a 15-inch limit on whatever, have it posted? Because you start doing different lakes, different spots. You know, I can't remember them all.
I understand, and we put it in the back of our fishing guide on each lake, but we're trying to create some consistency with some of our size limits to eliminate that aspect. And that's,
And if there is a special reg, it is posted with signs usually. Walleye at Merritt's different than a statewide reg. It's posted at each boat ramp. I assume you're talking about Hudson Lake.
Well,
I mean, that's
That's a start, yeah.
I've heard that rumor for a while.
I know you're not allowed suckers in the lake.
Oh, yeah?
And there was a big one in there a few months ago.
We're glad somebody fished it out.
Hudson Lake was a little bit different because it's an open fields and water body, and that's consistent statewide. And I know what you're saying, 'cause we don't have very many of them out here. We only have that one. But down east, we have tons of them, and so it was a statewide reg.
Largemouth bass.
Largemouth bass,
Yes.
21-inch minimum.
That's
Yeah,
pretty
but,
well hidden in the regulations.
Very well hidden.
I still haven't found it.
and
It took Linval 3 days to find her.
Some of us don't read much.
Yeah.
keep in mind, we're trying and sign special regulations, but also keep in mind that sometimes they make great targets and they're hard to keep up. Yeah. So we try, and we put a sign up at, for instance, we put a sign up at Cunningham Lake. It was about so big by so big on our zebra mussel issue and no boating. It didn't make it 3 days before it was tore down. It's one of those things where we try and do what we can, and When we order signs, we get them out to our districts to get the guys to put them up on our special regulations. If it's not a special regulation statewide, we don't post it. Because like you drive into a park area and you got this board that's like so by so with all these signs on it, and if you're like most people, you drive right on by it and you look and you glance, you know, it's like, okay, I got my park permit, and you go on. And, you know, that's kind of human nature, I think. But we try and post special regulations.
We have an open fields and water, kind of a similar deal with Peterson Lake down south and east of Twin Lakes. And there's no other fence around this lake or whatever, so the place they're supposed to park and access the lake, we put up a post and put our sign on there. And the cows in the pasture, we just find that the exact right height to scratch their chin on. So every time you go out, your sign would be on the ground. And it wasn't vandals or kids or whatever, but it was cows. So we had to come up with a new strategy for keeping signs up at the lake.
But yeah, I try to be, pretty proactive on that. Rat and Beaver has 12-inch minimum perch, so we posted it with signs and stuff, but we probably do miss a few things, so. If you see some, let me know, if you would, please, and I'll
Well,
try to address it, so.
Like I said, and I get asked a lot,
Sure.
the business I'm in.
Mm-hmm.
And like I said, I can't keep up on everybody. And I hate to give, a lot of times I say, I don't know,
If you get a question that you're not sure of, refer them to us. We'll be glad to talk to anybody about regulars. It's better to ask ahead of time and find out what it is before you go on a fishing trip. than
Glad to ask you.
Find
Sure.
out the hard way when you meet
that's-
Frank out there.
Yeah.
Your responsibility too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes?
You mentioned the muskies that married earlier.
Mm-hmm.
Has there been any thoughts or ideas to changing regulations to more protect those, either state or merit? So,
We're looking at that, and that's something that we're still collecting some information on. But, yeah, it's something we're looking at. It's something that hasn't been passed over or whatever. It's just at this point, we haven't moved forward on that. We're looking at a lot of our survey data. Muskie are one of those things that we probably survey more in the spring with our walleye netting than any other time. And we also look at our creel information to see what we're actually seeing out there. And it's amazing sometimes what you see in creel data.
Aren't they currently the most protected species?
They're 40-inch minimum.
Yeah, 40 inch and we only have one, right? Over
Yeah.
40.
Yeah.
I'd say they're pretty well protected.
Most of our creel is documented at very low harvest rates anyways, but it is something we're looking at, so.
But we are looking at it. It's something that's, administration has looked at before, so. Other questions? Comments? Suggestions?
When will they start stocking those? Just as soon as they get it out.
It'd be this fall, right after, Pelican, when we renovated September 6th, it was hot enough to kill fish for about 30 days. About October 8th, 10th, somewhere in there, we deemed it detoxified, and they started stocking fish right away. The hatcheries are really, right at that time of the year, are really wanting to get rid of their fish before their ponds and pipes and everything start freezing anyways, so. That's kind of why the time frame we shoot for renovating, late August, early September. The fish are usually stressed from the heat of the summer. It's usually your lowest lake levels that time of year to save on road known cost, and the hatchery's got those fish already raised, ready to go for this lake, so.
How hot does Pelican get, the water temp? What's the extreme maximum?
I don't even
Depends on
know.
the year, probably.
Yeah,
The hottest year, say 2012,
I would guess they got in upper 70s, just
70
guessing.
degree?
Mid uppers, I would just guess. Surface temp.
80,
Depends where you're at in the lake too.
Yeah.
Spring flows coming into it.
Yeah.
In certain areas will be a lot cooler than what it is as far away from the springs. as
And
you go.
judging by the renovations, there's some pretty good spring flows.
Yeah,
Yes.
there's a lot of springs in Pelican. Lots.
And that comes in at what, about 55, 56? What's that come in?
I would guess around 59.
59?
A lot of our groundwater is around that 59 degrees.
So that water gets
we've got it about as far down as we can actually physically take it right now. Just dropping the boards off because Dewey's pretty much the same level as, you know, as Hackberry, so, yeah. We're hoping this fall to put the boards in Dewey as high as we can go, pump some more water out of Hackberry into Dewey, hold it in the system there, and then renovate Hackberry, so.
I don't think it'll be as hard to drain Dewey because it's got kind of its own dam system there and.
Yeah, we're just kinda careful, it depends on the time of year on our water releases, just with other people, so.
One thing that kind of amazed me is how the water flows through that refuge from lake to lake and throughout that whole system. And that's one of the neat things about this project is mapping all that out and figuring out where the water flows so we know where the carp barriers needed to go. And, you know, we've renovated over the years in these lakes time after time. And I think this time we actually have a chance of being fairly successful with this project and not having to repeat it time after time. And at least get a lot more years in it than what we've had before. And I really think it's worth the extra effort to have that mapped out and figure out where the water all flows through that system, because it is an interconnected system.
Well, I commend what you've done because it's been done many times, but it's never been done right. And now I think it finally went back and.
I think technology and everything has helped us.
We need to get these carved out and I'm looking forward to Pelican being that, you know, might not see it myself.
Oh, yeah.
Hope it comes back soon enough.
It will, it will.
And
And
I'd like to see big fish, big orders out of Hackberry again too.
I understand, you know, we'll keep it in mind, you know.
Just keep it in mind, that's all.
Yeah. We're either gonna make you happy or them happy or somewhere in between, so we're gonna do our best though.
any other comments or questions?
Great meeting.
Thank you. I appreciate you all coming. I appreciate your time. And keep in mind, if you have questions, call these guys, call me.